When we talk about health in our later years, we often think of medication, mobility aids, and regular checkups. But there's something even more fundamental that quietly shapes the health of older adults, and that's autonomy. The ability to make decisions for ourselves, manage our own routines, and determine how we spend our time each day is not just a privilege, it's a health protective force. In a nursing home setting, this autonomy is often stripped away in the name of convenience, safety, or structure. But what's rarely discussed is how that erosion of daily control has far-reaching effects on both physical and mental health. In most nursing homes, daily schedules are fixed. Meals are served at predetermined times, bathing happens on a rotation, and even simple choices like when to go outside or what to watch on TV are regulated. This structured environment might look orderly on the surface, but research shows that when older adults lose control over these basic elements of their lives, it can lead to rapid functional decline. A landmark study published in the Journal of Gerontology found that nursing home residents who had less decision-making ability were significantly more likely to experience worsening health conditions, including reduced mobility, increased depressive symptoms, and even earlier mortality. Why? Because the body and mind respond to purpose. When you're in charge of your day, no matter how simple your routine may be, it signals to your brain that your choices matter. That alone can elevate mood, improve cognitive function, and maintain a stronger sense of self-worth. Without that daily reinforcement, residents can become passive. Tasks that used to be manageable, brushing teeth, choosing clothes, tidying up, start to feel unnecessary, and over time, abilities that once came naturally begin to atrophy. This creates a dangerous cycle. The more dependent you become, the more others take over, and the less opportunity you have to reassert control over your life. It's not just about independence for independence's sake, it's about preserving cognitive vitality. The Harvard Aging Brain Study showed that older adults who actively made small daily decisions maintained stronger connections in the brain's default mode network, which is associated with memory and future planning. Take that away, and the brain begins to disengage. Even more alarming is the psychological toll. Studies from the National Institute on Aging have repeatedly shown that a perceived lack of control is a major predictor of anxiety, depression, and even sleep disturbances in older adults. In environments where choices are minimized, many residents begin to feel like passengers in their own lives. That loss of self-determination can lead to a deep, persistent sadness that no amount of group activities or hallway bingo can fix. Even the physical health repercussions are serious. A University of Michigan study observed that residents who had more personal agency, even something as small as choosing the decor of their room, had better immune response markers and lower inflammation levels compared to residents in more restrictive environments. The science is clear. Choice supports life. So when I say I regret moving into a nursing home, this is one of the deepest regrets of all. I didn't expect that handing over the keys to my daily decisions would also mean handing over parts of my personality, my drive, and my health. I went from being someone who managed her own breakfast, read in the garden when she pleased, and made spontaneous phone calls to friends, to someone who waited for a bell to ring before being led to the dining hall. That transition, though subtle at first, became suffocating. And it didn't just change my lifestyle, it changed my identity. Of course, some level of support is needed as we age. But support doesn't have to mean surrender. Environments that honor autonomy, where routines are flexible and input from residents is valued, are far more successful at maintaining long-term well-being. If you're considering a nursing home, ask yourself, will I still be able to choose what I eat? When I sleep? Who I spend time with? Because those small decisions are your lifelines, your daily proof that you are still in charge of your story. I learned too late that losing them meant losing more than I ever anticipated. It meant losing strength, spark, and a piece of dignity that takes a long time to rebuild. If I could go back, I would have fought harder to preserve those freedoms in whatever way I could, because in the end, autonomy is not a luxury. It is a necessity for healthy, vibrant aging. One of the most damaging aspects of nursing home life that often goes unnoticed is the way it quietly encourages a sedentary lifestyle. Movement, especially in our senior years, is not just a form of exercise, it is medicine. It stimulates circulation, supports joint flexibility, sharpens balance, and most importantly, sustains independence. But in many nursing homes, the design of daily life limits opportunities for meaningful physical activity. Chairs are padded and inviting, hallways are short and unchallenging, and the encouragement to move often comes as a passive suggestion rather than an integrated part of the day. Residents are rarely empowered to stay active beyond the occasional group stretch session or once-a-week seated aerobics class. As a result, muscles weaken, bones lose density, and mobility declines faster than it would in a more dynamic environment. This decline isn't just physical, it affects mental clarity, digestion, cardiovascular health, and even immune function. A sedentary lifestyle has been conclusively linked to increased mortality in seniors, according to a major study published in The Lancet. Researchers found that individuals over 65 who were inactive for more than 7 hours a day had a significantly higher risk of cardiovascular events and premature death. That same study found that even modest daily movement, such as walking for 15 minutes every few hours, resulted in markedly better outcomes. And yet, many nursing homes are structured in a way that discourages that kind of casual movement. Meals are brought to residents' tables. Activities are scheduled in rooms just down the hall. Assistance is often so efficient that residents no longer need to get up to do simple tasks like reaching for a book or fetching a glass of water. While that may sound helpful on the surface, it actually accelerates deterioration. Muscles begin to atrophy within days of disuse. Balance diminishes without regular challenge. The body adapts quickly to stillness, but the consequences are brutal: increased fall risk, slower healing, and a deeper dependence on others. One particularly troubling pattern I noticed after moving into the nursing home was how quickly I began to internalize stillness. The urge to walk after meals disappeared. I found myself choosing the elevator instead of the stairs, even if it was just one floor. The excitement I once felt taking afternoon walks around my neighborhood was replaced by a kind of emotional inertia, not quite sadness, but a dullness that made movement feel unnecessary. And that's the danger. Because physical fitness is not just about strength, it's about momentum. When that momentum breaks, getting it back becomes exponentially harder. Studies from the Journal of Aging and Physical Activity have shown that seniors who lose their walking routines are twice as likely to need mobility aids within a year. And yet in many care facilities, there's no built-in encouragement to keep moving. No tailored walking plans, no physical therapy follow-ups unless there's been an injury, and no real accountability for helping residents stay active day to day. The emotional effects of inactivity are just as stark. Exercise is one of the most powerful natural antidepressants we have. It stimulates the release of endorphins, reduces cortisol levels, and improves sleep quality, all essential factors for emotional stability in aging populations. But when that movement stops, mood often sinks. A 2021 report from the Mayo Clinic linked physical inactivity in older adults to a 30% higher rate of reported depression symptoms, even among those with no prior history of mental illness. In my own experience, the longer I stayed still, the more disconnected I felt, not just from others, but from myself. My sense of agency faded. I stopped feeling like someone who could take action in her own life. That psychological shift, from active participant to passive recipient, was subtle, but it shook me more deeply than any diagnosis ever could. And then came the physical pains. A sore back from too much sitting, stiff hips, sluggish digestion, circulation issues that made my feet colder than usual. These weren't medical emergencies, but they were signs that my body was slipping into decline. And when I asked about increasing my activity, I was handed a calendar of events, mostly passive crafts and seated games. The truth is, most nursing homes are not equipped to keep residents physically vibrant. They may offer physical therapy after an injury or provide walkers and canes for fall prevention, but they rarely invest in proactive fitness strategies. There's no real emphasis on daily walking targets, personalized movement routines, or progressive strength training adapted for older bodies. And yet, all of these have been shown to dramatically improve longevity and quality of life. If I had known how profoundly the environment would shape my body's decline, I would have done everything in my power to stay in a place that encouraged motion. Even walking up and down a hallway with a friend each day would have been better than the slow slide into stillness that I experienced. We often talk about aging as something that happens to us, but in many ways, we participate in it. And movement is one of the most powerful ways to resist the parts of aging that steal our vitality. If you're listening to this and still have the ability to walk, stretch, or rise from a chair without help, treasure that and preserve it. Make it a daily priority. Because once you lose that freedom of movement, reclaiming it is a mountain few ever climb again. And the sad truth is, most nursing homes don't just fail to prevent that loss, they quietly accelerate it. I wish someone had told me that before I moved in. Food is supposed to be one of life's pleasures, a daily opportunity for nourishment, comfort, and even healing. But in many nursing homes, food becomes something far less joyful. It becomes institutional, pre-planned, mass-produced, stripped of variety and personal preference. And what's worse, it often fails to meet the unique nutritional needs of aging bodies. When I moved into a nursing home, I naively assumed that meals would be thoughtfully designed with senior health in mind, low in sodium, rich in fiber, full of fresh produce, and tailored to support everything from bone density to brain health. But what I encountered was far from that. The menus rotated in predictable cycles, offering heavily processed dishes, canned vegetables, overcooked proteins, and sugary desserts as a default. Meals were cooked in bulk to feed dozens at once, and individual preferences, allergies, and sensitivities were frequently overlooked or deprioritized. That shift, from home-cooked care to cafeteria-style efficiency, had an immediate impact on how I felt physically and emotionally. Research supports what many residents experience firsthand. Poor nutrition is rampant in long-term care facilities. According to the Journal of Nutrition, Health and Aging, more than 60% of nursing home residents are either malnourished or at risk of malnutrition, despite receiving 3 meals a day. This is because the issue isn't just about quantity of food, it's about quality, variety, and bioavailability. For example, older adults need more protein to maintain muscle mass, yet many facilities serve small, overcooked portions that offer little nutritional value. Calcium and vitamin D are essential to protect against osteoporosis, yet milk is often replaced with powdered alternatives that lack absorption. Fresh fruits and vegetables are critical for digestion and immune function, yet they're frequently swapped out for canned options packed with sodium and preservatives. These choices, repeated daily, chip away at the nutritional foundation our bodies depend on, especially as we age. What's more, the loss of control over what and when you eat has subtle but profound consequences on overall well-being. I used to enjoy making my own oatmeal in the morning with chia seeds, cinnamon, and blueberries. But in the nursing home, breakfast was served at 8 a.m. sharp, always white toast, scrambled eggs, and watery coffee. If you weren't hungry then, too bad. If you wanted something different, you had to file a request, which might be honored the next week. This lack of food autonomy dampened my appetite and dulled my relationship with eating. I stopped looking forward to meals. I stopped eating as much. Over time, I began losing weight without intending to, and I wasn't alone. Several residents I knew suffered unexplained fatigue, digestive issues, and worsening lab results, only to discover they were quietly becoming deficient in key nutrients. And the most tragic part is how avoidable it all was. A report from the World Health Organization highlights that personalized nutrition in older adults significantly improves quality of life, reduces hospitalizations, and even slows cognitive decline. Yet in many care facilities, there's no framework for customizing diets to fit individual needs. Residents with diabetes are often given carb-heavy meals. Those with kidney disease receive high-sodium soups. Food becomes a one-size-fits-all solution in a population that needs the exact opposite. And this isn't just a matter of preference, it's a health crisis. Poor diet in older adults has been linked to increased inflammation, loss of independence, greater susceptibility to illness, and faster cognitive decline. For those already battling chronic conditions, the wrong diet is like adding gasoline to a fire. It accelerates deterioration in ways that are hard to detect until the damage has already set in. There's also the emotional and cultural aspect of eating that often gets erased. Meals are deeply personal. They connect us to our memories, our families, our traditions. But in the nursing home, food is stripped of all that. No more Saturday morning pancakes with grandkids. No more tomato soup the way your mother made it. No more late-night snacks, special teas, or favorite indulgences. And this erasure, small as it may seem, chips away at our identity. Eating becomes a task, not an experience. A box to check off, not something to enjoy. This emotional disconnect can lead to further disinterest in food, triggering a dangerous cycle of undernutrition, fatigue, and disempowerment. I wish I had known how significant the food issue would become before I made the decision to move. I had always assumed nursing homes were health-focused places. But the truth is, many are budget-focused, designed to deliver the most food at the lowest cost, with minimal customization. Some homes do better than others, and a few invest in dietitians or culinary staff who truly care. But those are exceptions, not the rule. If I could speak to my younger self, I'd say this: don't overlook food. Ask to see the weekly menus before moving in. Speak to the kitchen staff. Find out how special diets are handled. Because what you eat, day in and day out, becomes the building block of your health. And if that foundation is weak, everything else begins to crumble. For me, it was one of the biggest regrets, not realizing that the meals meant to sustain me were, in fact, draining me. When people imagine life in a nursing home, they often picture a warm, social environment. One where residents are surrounded by peers, engaged in cheerful activities, and free from the stress of daily responsibilities. But the truth behind those walls is often far lonelier. Despite being surrounded by others, many residents experience a deep and persistent sense of isolation. The kind of isolation that doesn't come from being alone, but from feeling invisible. You can be seated in a crowded dining hall and still feel utterly disconnected. You can be visited by staff 3 times a day and still feel emotionally abandoned. And that chronic sense of loneliness is not just sad, it's dangerous. According to the National Institute on Aging, loneliness and social isolation in older adults are linked to a 50% increased risk of dementia, a 32% higher risk of stroke, and a significantly elevated risk of premature death. That's not just correlation, it's consequence. When I moved into the nursing home, I was hopeful. I told myself I'd make new friends, find a sense of community, and take advantage of all the scheduled group activities. But reality set in quickly. The conversations were shallow and repetitive, often limited to weather updates and mealtime complaints. Many of the residents were either too withdrawn, too tired, or too cognitively impaired to engage in meaningful dialogue. Staff members, while kind, were stretched thin, moving from room to room with efficiency but little time for connection. And despite being surrounded by people, I began to feel more isolated than I ever had living alone. The noise of communal life didn't drown out the silence inside me. In fact, it made it worse, because it reminded me of everything I was missing: deep friendships, spontaneous laughter, and a real sense of being known. Even the activities meant to encourage socialization felt hollow. Bingo on Thursdays. Craft hour on Mondays. Movie nights with the same 3 films on rotation. There was no room for individual interests, no space to share stories, no opportunities to lead or teach or grow. Instead of being asked what I was passionate about, I was handed a calendar and told to circle what I liked, as if my identity could be summed up in a list of generic pastimes. And over time, something inside me began to dim. Not because I was ill. Not because I was aging. But because I had lost my sense of purpose. That was the hardest part to explain, even to myself. I wasn't just lonely, I was drifting. And the more I drifted, the more the world outside the nursing home felt like a distant memory I could never return to. There's a cruel irony in how we treat older adults. We assume that once someone retires, raises their children, and reaches a certain age, they're ready to step away from meaning, as if they've already lived their most important days. But that's a myth. Purpose isn't reserved for the young. In fact, it becomes even more important as we age. A landmark study published in the Journal of the American Medical Association found that older adults who reported having a strong sense of purpose were significantly less likely to develop Alzheimer's, had lower rates of cardiovascular disease, and lived longer overall. Purpose acts like an anchor, something that holds you steady when everything else begins to shift. Without it, we lose our grip on identity, motivation, and joy. In the nursing home, I watched it happen again and again. Residents who once taught classes, raised families, ran businesses, or volunteered in their communities were reduced to names on a door. Their past achievements became trivia, shared during intake interviews and then forgotten. And with no roles to fill, no challenges to face, and no one asking for their input, they faded. Slowly, quietly, they stopped trying. I saw the same blank stare in more and more faces, not because they had nothing left to give, but because no one was asking them to give it. The damage of that spiritual emptiness is just as severe as any physical illness, but it's harder to detect and rarely addressed. Antidepressants are prescribed. Counseling is suggested. But very little is done to help residents rediscover meaning, and meaning is what sustains us. I remember one afternoon when a fellow resident named Margaret, who had once been a teacher, asked the activities coordinator if she could host a weekly reading group. She was politely told that activities were pre-scheduled by administration and that such initiatives had to go through a formal process. Weeks passed. Nothing happened. Margaret gave up. She started spending more time in her room. I never saw her bring up another idea again. That moment stayed with me, because it captured the quiet ways institutions can extinguish the very thing that keeps people alive. We're not just physical beings. We are emotional and intellectual ones too. And when we're no longer seen as contributors, we stop believing we have anything left to contribute. If you're considering a nursing home, ask what opportunities exist for residents to lead, create, or mentor. Ask how staff support not just health, but hope. Because without connection and purpose, no facility can claim to support true well-being. My biggest regret wasn't giving up my home. It was giving up the parts of myself that only thrive when they're needed. My wisdom, my voice, my curiosity. I believed I was moving somewhere to be cared for. But what I really needed was a place where I could still care, about something, about someone, about myself. That's what was missing. And that's what I hope more people realize before making the same mistake I did. Among the most overlooked yet deeply troubling issues in nursing homes is the rampant over-medication of residents, a quiet epidemic that often hides behind a mask of medical legitimacy. On the surface, it may seem logical. Older adults tend to have more health conditions, so more medications must be required to manage them. But the reality is far more complex and, frankly, more dangerous. The term polypharmacy refers to the simultaneous use of multiple medications by a single patient, often 5 or more at once. In nursing homes, polypharmacy isn't the exception. It's the rule. And what many don't realize is how this practice contributes to a cascade of avoidable problems, from falls and confusion to dangerous drug interactions and reduced quality of life. The medications intended to help us can, in excessive combinations, do just the opposite, slowly robbing us of our energy, clarity, and vitality. I learned this the hard way. Within my first month of living in the nursing home, my medication list doubled. Pills were added just in case, a sleeping aid to help with occasional restlessness, a blood pressure medication despite no recent issues, and a mild antidepressant after a single conversation with a facility psychologist. None of these decisions felt malicious, but they happened quickly, and without thorough discussion. What I didn't know at the time was that once you're on multiple medications, it becomes difficult to pinpoint what's causing side effects. I began experiencing dizziness, digestive problems, and a constant sense of mental fog. I chalked it up to aging, not realizing that many of these symptoms were directly linked to the very medications I had been prescribed. When I eventually asked for a full review of my treatment plan, I was met with polite indifference. That's standard for your age, they told me. But feeling half awake every day didn't feel standard. It felt wrong. According to a 2022 study published in the British Medical Journal, nearly 40% of nursing home residents are prescribed potentially inappropriate medications. These include drugs with high sedative properties, strong anticholinergic effects that impair cognitive function, and medications that have a high likelihood of adverse interactions when combined. The same study found that nearly 1/3 of hospitalizations in older adults were linked to adverse drug reactions, not disease progression. That's a staggering figure. It means that many seniors are not being hospitalized because they're sick, but because they're over-medicated. And still, in many care homes, medication reviews are infrequent and rarely holistic. There is no proactive system in place to reevaluate whether certain prescriptions are still needed, whether dosages should be lowered, or whether lifestyle adjustments could replace certain drugs altogether. The problem is also rooted in convenience. In a setting where staff are managing the care of dozens of residents, medications often become the fastest route to behavior management. A resident is anxious. Sedate them. They wander at night. Add a sleeping pill. They get agitated in the afternoons. Prescribe a mood stabilizer. Over time, these chemical interventions become normalized, and the person inside the patient becomes harder and harder to reach. I saw this happen to my neighbor, John. He was a former professor with a sharp mind and a sarcastic wit. After a few weeks of disruptive behavior, pacing the halls, asking repetitive questions, he was given a new round of prescriptions. Within days, his spark faded. He slept more than he was awake. He stopped speaking up during group activities. Staff said he was adjusting, but those of us who knew him before recognized the truth. He was being dulled, not helped. There is a vital distinction between care and control. Medications can absolutely be life-saving and essential in many cases. But when they're used as tools of control, to manage behavior or maintain a sense of order, they can do irreparable harm. And older adults are particularly vulnerable. As we age, our liver and kidney function decline, which means drugs stay in our systems longer and can build up to toxic levels more easily. Our brains become more sensitive to chemical changes, making us more prone to confusion, memory issues, and mood disturbances from medications that might barely affect a younger person. Despite this, medications are often prescribed without geriatric adjustments, and without the informed consent or understanding of the person taking them. I regret not speaking up sooner. I regret trusting that every prescription was in my best interest. Because once I started asking questions, I realized how few checks were in place. There were no routine medication reviews that involved me as an active participant. No holistic approach to wellness that considered diet, movement, or emotional health as potential alternatives. It was a pill for every symptom, without considering the root cause or the cumulative effect. Eventually, I sought an outside consultation with a geriatric pharmacist who was horrified by my medication load. Together, we worked to reduce my prescriptions from 10 down to 5, and almost immediately, my energy began to return. I started sleeping better, thinking more clearly, and moving without the same heavy fatigue that had dogged me for months. It was a powerful reminder of just how much over-medication can steal from us, quietly, insidiously, without anyone even noticing. If you or a loved one is considering a nursing home, ask about their approach to medication. Do they have a geriatric pharmacist on staff? How often are medications reviewed for necessity? Are non-pharmaceutical interventions prioritized when possible? Because medications should support a better life, not replace it. And in too many facilities, the line between healing and control has been blurred. My advice: stay curious, stay involved, and never stop asking questions about what you're being given and why. Your body deserves that. Your mind deserves that. And your future depends on it. While my regrets about moving into a nursing home run deep, what haunts me most is knowing that other options existed. Paths that could have preserved my independence, nurtured my health, and honored my identity in ways that institutional care simply never could. For many of us, the choice to enter a nursing home comes from a place of fear of falling, of being alone, of becoming a burden. But what isn't often discussed are the alternatives that offer care without confinement, support without surrender, and structure without stripping away the very things that make life meaningful. Aging does not have to mean institutionalization. In fact, with a growing body of research and innovations in elder care, there are now more options than ever for seniors to age in place, live with dignity, and maintain a sense of purpose and control over their lives. One of the most powerful alternatives is aging in place, the decision to remain in your own home, often with modifications to make it safer and more accessible. This could mean installing grab bars, stair lifts, non-slip flooring, or using medical alert systems to provide peace of mind. According to the AARP, nearly 77% of older adults want to age in their homes, and studies have shown that doing so leads to better mental health outcomes, lower rates of depression, and fewer hospitalizations. Aging in place allows you to keep your routines, your community connections, and your sense of personal agency. When paired with in-home care services, such as nurses, aides, or companions, it becomes a highly personalized form of support. You choose who comes into your home, what times they arrive, and which tasks they help you with. That level of choice alone can be the difference between feeling cared for and feeling controlled. Then there's the rise of co-housing and shared living arrangements, models where seniors live together in homes or communities, supporting one another emotionally, socially, and sometimes even financially. These arrangements often feature shared kitchens, gardens, or activity spaces, and they encourage a culture of mutual respect and cooperation. A 2020 study in the Journal of Aging Studies found that older adults living in co-housing environments reported higher satisfaction with their social lives, stronger senses of community, and even better health indicators than their peers in institutional settings. This isn't about pretending to be young again, it's about preserving the basic human needs for connection, choice, and contribution. In these environments, elders are not just residents, they're neighbors, mentors, and friends. They participate in decision-making, they share responsibilities, and they remain active players in shaping their lives. Another promising alternative is adult day programs, structured community centers where seniors can spend part of their day engaging in enriching activities, socializing, and receiving light medical supervision while still returning to their homes in the evening. These programs reduce isolation and caregiver burnout while keeping elders mentally and physically engaged. According to the National Adult Day Services Association, participants in these programs experience lower rates of depression and cognitive decline, and many families report significant improvements in their loved ones' quality of life. These centers focus on enrichment, not confinement, with art classes, music sessions, exercise routines, and opportunities for learning. That sense of stimulation and variety is what keeps the mind sharp and the spirit full, and yet it's often missing from the day-to-day routine of traditional nursing homes. Let's not forget the growing role of technology in supporting aging outside of institutions. Smart home devices now allow for remote monitoring, medication reminders, fall detection, and emergency alerts, all while maintaining privacy and independence. Virtual check-ins with doctors, therapists, or dietitians are becoming increasingly accessible, allowing seniors to manage their health proactively from the comfort of home. For those with mobility issues, grocery delivery, transportation services, and even telefitness classes are removing barriers that once made independent living feel impossible. These advances don't just represent convenience, they represent freedom. They're the tools that let us live longer without giving up our autonomy. For those who do need round-the-clock care, not all options are created equal. There are small, residential care homes, sometimes known as board and care homes, which house fewer residents and offer a more personalized, home-like environment. These places often provide better staff-to-resident ratios, more tailored routines, and greater flexibility in meal plans and activity choices. They aren't perfect, and they vary widely in quality, but they can be a far cry from the sterile, institutional feel of a larger facility. What matters most is asking the right questions. Will I be known here? Will I be heard? Will my preferences be respected? If the answer is no, keep looking. My greatest mistake was believing that a nursing home was the only responsible choice. That belief was born out of fear, not knowledge. I didn't understand the full spectrum of care models available. I didn't ask the right questions, and I didn't push hard enough to build a support system that would let me stay where I felt most alive. Now I know better. And if I could offer one piece of wisdom to anyone facing the same crossroads, it would be this: don't trade your freedom for false security. You have more choices than you think. Explore them. Demand transparency. Build a plan with people who respect your voice and your vision for how you want to live. Because aging is not the end of your story, it's a chapter that still belongs to you. Make sure it's written with intention, not just acceptance.